Hello there, this is B.R. Neumann, and you are listening to a 15-card tarot spread drawn specifically for you at this moment in time. Before we get into it, I'll explain the significance of each region of the tarot spread. And if you happen to already be familiar with the way this is all going to work, you can simply skip on over to the 2-minute and 45-second mark, at which point the reading will begin. Otherwise, I will now give you the means to follow along by explaining these regions. And there are 5 such regions, starting with the central theme, and the 2-dimensional timeline doorways on either side of it. The central theme is the card in the very center of this spread, and on either side of it there are 2 doors. You can choose one. And on the other side of these doors are entire dimensional timelines outlined by 3 cards each. So that would be the upper left-hand and upper right-hand regions. In the lower left-hand region, you'll see 3 cards, and those are your most distant past, the past immediately following the most distant past, as relevant to this spread, and then the most recent past, which is of course directly related to the central theme, and plays a part in creating the central theme, which is a snapshot of this current situation in which you are embedded, from which you'll be making the choice regarding how you will proceed according to these 2-dimensional timeline options. On the lower right-hand side, there are 3 cards outlining your fate section, the first of which is what is going to immediately happen, no matter what choice you do make. However, it's important to note that you choose the way it unfolds, the way you experience it, the nature of it, the flavor of it, according to your chosen dimensional timeline. And then obviously the 2 remaining cards are simply what happens after that, and then what happens after that, the ultimate fate section, which is simply what the entire spread is leading you to, preparing you for. It's the final culmination. So bear in mind as I proceed that you always have the option to not activate the card, by choosing to avoid or failing to embrace the opportunities presented therein. The events in your life will simply unfold according to the greatest probabilities. The idea here is to put the steering wheel in your hands, so whatever you choose, make sure that you embrace or activate the potentials outlined by each definition. Otherwise, what occurs is something like surrendering the unfolding of events to the random, to what I've called the dead mechanism of the universe. A rather impersonal force, much like the forces of nature, that really don't have any consideration for your experience within the whole process. But you, as a self-aware, conscious, sentient being, can actually, elect the nature of the experiences that you have, and make them really pan out for you, avoiding any unnecessary complications, and really taking advantage of opportunities presented. So with that, we'll jump right into your central theme. The Knight of Swords. Like the rest of the 16 court cards, this court card has one of the Myers-Briggs personality profiles assigned to it, and in this case this is the ESTJ, or the Extroverted Sensing, Thinking, Judger. Embracing, activating this card, will entail embracing, activating this personality profile within you, and perhaps this is a minor aspect of your personality being brought to the forefront, or this might be your dominant personality profile, identified as the most relevant contributor to a strategy that will result in optimizing your ability to take advantage of the opportunities being presented and overcome any challenges that you may face as well. The personality profile itself, extroverted meaning outwardly focused, extending the self into the world from the core out rather than from the outside in, drawing the external into the internal. Sensing rather than intuiting entails deriving decisions from evidence, measurable data. Thinking rather than feeling, rather self-explanatory. Prioritizing perhaps the left hemisphere of the brain rather than the right, so the logical, reasonable side, the objective side of things, rather than the feeling, compassionate, creative, intuitive side. And lastly, judging versus perceiving. So judging means strategizing at every juncture, analyzing all of the pros and cons for every situation. So this is a very objective personality profile, and a very commanding personality profile, very hard-charging. A natural administrator, so they demand order and structure. So they're very opinionated, results-driven, and also quite traditional and conservative. Additionally, I should mention, this can come in as a personality profile that you encounter. For example, a close relative, perhaps a father or grandfather. This personality profile is common among the males of the older generations. And the intent here is to produce order, to produce coherence, to develop responsibility, thus generating desirable results. So this central theme is not only like a snapshot of your current situation, but it also outlines the areas of your life in which this entire tarot spread is referencing most directly. So you can reflect upon the nature of this card in order to discern the areas of your life that this spread is most relevant to. The more you reflect, the more insight you will be able to derive from this spread. From this position, you can choose the left-hand path or the right-hand path. So we'll start with the left. If consciously activated, your experience of this card will bring about 3 cards, which I will define in order. The first of which being the immediate response to having chosen this card, having chosen this doorway or this dimensional timeline. And the second and third cards in this section being the events unfolding immediately after the initial response to the activation of this dimensional timeline, and the final culmination, especially when juxtaposed with the fate section, which we will cover last. Alright, so the following card is the doorway. Option 1, left-hand side. The Lust card. Number 11 of the major arcana. This card embodies the process of transcending basic, petty, lower, primitive desires in place of higher reasoning, higher sense of morality. Through this process, the individual harnesses all of that raw potential energy, drawing strength from the wisdom and sense of integrity that ensues. Ultimately, this experience is quite inspiring and does fuel creativity, as well as a general sense of fulfillment and liberty. This card is associated with Leo, and more specifically, Venus in Leo. So this is creative development of passion, instilling a sense of joy. On the Tree of Life, the Lust card is the bridge between Sphirith number 4, Chesed, and Sphirith number 5, Gebura. Sphirith number 4 is benevolence. It's a healing energy that repairs the world. And Sphirith number 5 is a boundary-setting mechanism, a filter, if you will. It's the foundation of stringency. So this is where you'll find conflict, anxiety, defeat, and disappointment, but not without purpose. It's character building, strength building. By bridging the benevolence and healing force of Chesed with the stringency of Gebura, a powerful remedial force is applied to the source of drama, conflict, anxiety, worry, cheating, defeat, and disappointment alike, as higher laws render lower laws irrelevant. This indicates a time of great self-reflection, honest acceptance, and a sense of accountability, so long as the lower primal inclinations are identified as such. Okay, so if this is the doorway you choose, it will bring about your direct experience of the following 3 cards, which I will now define in order. The Two of Cups. Like all 2s in tarot, the Two of Cups is associated with Chokhmah on the Tree of Life, Sphirith number 2. So this is the first power of conscious intellect within creation, its imagination, its potentiality pondered, and intuitive insight. And this is associated with the right hemisphere of the brain, the region that deals with abstract thought. So all of the 2s denote the experience of reflection, contemplation of possibility. In this case, specifically as manifest through water, this is the experience of ecstatic love, fantasy, a romantic dream. Its subject is the pursuit of bliss, and often indicates a time in which one must become very clear about what they truly want, what they truly desire, becoming as honestly clear as one can be regarding wants, desires, and the pursuit of ecstatic love aligns the self with the law of attraction, allowing one to broadcast a singular frequency, attracting a singular result. A lack of clarity regarding this area broadcasts mixed signals out to the universe, which does not know what to respond with. The Two of Cups calls for such coherence. The Devil. This major arcana card embodies the excessive, whether this is the excessively good or the excessively bad, the entire spectrum in excess. The Devil's mantra, for better or worse, is, "I am born to be free. I do not serve." Despite what the natural inclination might be, this card is not to be shunned. The wisest approach to this card does not involve suppression, as that will never be successful. As is learned in another major arcana card, the Lust card, the beast is meant to be tamed and directed. All of that potential is meant to be harnessed. So in this case, this excessive devil energy can be directed in a healthy way. There is such a thing as a healthy dose of selfishness, particularly if an individual is inclined to be service-oriented, and they may leave themselves in the dark. They may neglect their own needs. And the devil comes around to remind us that there are times in which, in order to properly be of service, we have to first serve ourselves, prioritize the self first. So, thinking in political terms, for example, nationalism as opposed to globalism is an appropriate match. And this may in fact be counterintuitive to the naturally compassionate, those who would seek to prioritize other less fortunate nations. But realistically, to be of best service to the less fortunate, it is wisest to ensure that we remain consistently capable of being of service. So this can be likened to, in an airplane emergency, securing your own oxygen mask before anyone else's. Why? So that you will be there to secure everyone else's. So it's very simple, yet understandably difficult to digest. So properly embracing this card will entail honest reflection. Is this an obvious case of chaos needing to be managed? Or might it be time to take that healthy dose of selfishness? The Four of Cups. Like all fours in tarot, this is associated with spirit number 4, Chesed, on the Tree of Life, and this is a benevolent force, a healing energy that repairs the world, and as manifest through water, in this case, this represents a healing encounter with affection, devotion. It brings with it an air of kindness and tenderness, compassion. Being associated with Cancer, it is a maternal force, nurturing, loving, supportive, but in excess can be smothering, pathological, obsessive, and dependent. So the emphasis here should be on self-reliance if this card is to be embraced properly and used to its fullest remedial potential. So the activation of this card would entail a great deal of personal reflection with the intent to empower the self, to strengthen the entire system from the foundation up, from the core out. Knowing the self is crucial. It might be wise to launch an investigation into any codependent dynamics that might be hindering your ability to grow and thrive as an individual. Through the experience of this card, of course, you must honor your prerogative to receive a healing remedial force, receive devotion, receive tenderness and affection, but I would only advise that you remain mindful of the possibility that codependent dynamics might develop, if there's any wavering personal incentive to continue growing, learning, pursuing empowerment independently. Alright, so if you spend a moment to imagine what this unfolding of events might look like for you, and is this something that you would enjoy? Is this something you would benefit from? Are there unnecessary complications in this that you might prefer to avoid? To do this sufficiently, it's good to have something to compare it to. Another timeline to reference, perhaps. So, we'll jump right into that, starting with the doorway, or point of activation. Option 2, right-hand side. The Seven of Wands, like all sevens in tarot, is associated with Netzach in the Tree of Life, which often manifests as a temporary obstacle, placed directly in front of you, forcing you to stop, forcing you to examine yourself, strengthen your reserves, address the weakest links in your existence, and build up enough potential energy to transcend that obstacle, and then therefore, when faced with similar obstacles in future, or obstacles of a similar strength, you simply transcend them, you don't even notice them. So it may seem rather inconvenient at first, but it's character building, it's strength building, and that's the way that it always manifests along the sevens. So whether it's fire, earth, air, or water, it's the same. In this case, as manifest through fire, or wands, this is courage, despite the challenge, despite the nature or the severity of the challenge at hand. It's the will to carry on, a direct encounter with your source of courage. Sometimes this brings up the theme of pride. Sometimes it brings up themes like narcissism, false courage. All of these things have to be crumbled. They have to fall away. And they are definitely subject to this kind of erosion under the pressure of Netzach. Whatever is false courage will reveal itself as it is, and then therefore fall away or be rejected by you in the pursuit of true courage, because you have to have true courage in order to actually transcend this obstacle. The obstacle won't accept a falsehood. It won't accept anything fake. It has to be genuine and authentic. It will not budge for anything contrived, and you'll know this, and therefore do what is necessary. So of course, activating this card or embracing it will entail doing what is necessary, being honest with yourself about what is true courage and what is false. Where are the facades? Where are the cliches? And then upon honestly assessing the situation at hand, honestly assessing the nature of the challenge, the severity of it perhaps, what will sustain you? If you have an answer to that, and if you can pursue it, you have precisely what you need. This card very accurately represents that entire process. Okay, if you walk through this door, you will bring about the following 3 cards, in order. The Star. This card is about faith. It's about hope. It's about trust, taking a leap of faith, and spiritual insight that allows that to happen. So it's about seeking and finding inspiration that allows one to take an action based on faith and see it all the way through. It's associated with Aquarius and Pisces, but Aquarius to a greater degree, and more specifically Jupiter in Aquarius, but also Venus in Pisces. This expands one's ability to access dream space and visions and insights that come through there, and expands one's capacity to imagine what might be possible. And it is this contemplation of possibility and potentiality that enables the leap of faith. On the Tree of Life, the star acts as a bridge between Sphirith number 2, Chokmah, which is associated with the right hemisphere of the brain, that which contemplates potentiality, and Sphirith number 6, Tiferet, which is the light of Christ, spirituality, integration, compassion, and the direct interaction between the self and the spiritual cosmic soup, from which all things spring forth. The role of the star is to familiarize the self with cosmic coherence, and this process lets the individual know what is out of alignment and what is in alignment, allowing the individual to decide precisely where faith is most wisely invested. The Eight of Discs. Like all eights in tarot, this is associated with Fifth Eight, Hod, on the Tree of Life, which is action taken from acceptance or surrender, and in this case, as manifest through discs or earth, this is proper investment. This is management, wise calculation, careful consideration of your resources. And this is associated with Virgo, so meticulous consideration of details, emphasis on personal service, and responsible action. So upon careful consideration and personal reflection, you should be able to determine precisely what this is referring to. Consider the possibility that the action you have been avoiding may in fact be the action you must take at this time. Go straight for it. Embracing this card will entail slowing down, looking at all of the details. What could you be missing? Assume that there is something that you're missing. You need more information. Delve into the situation, knowing that you're going to be taking in a lot of information. Study everything you can. Investigate everything until you can stand it no longer and must take action. So it's implied here that there is a need for confidence in your action, and you cannot have confidence unless you are absolutely certain about the integrity and quality of what you're doing. So proceed cautiously. Dot all of your I's, cross all of your T's. Proceed patiently, slowly, but proceed nonetheless. Even if it takes you more time than you're comfortable with, appropriate action is worth the wait. The Moon. This major arcana card speaks to one's own deep, dark, personal abyss. It casts light upon one's own personal illusions, forcing us to face them. Sometimes we believe them to be real. The Moon never gives us all of the information we require to confidently determine whether or not these visions or experiences are reflections of the real or the unreal, truth or illusion. We are left in the dark, facing the light or the abyss within, waiting for the spark of insight and inspiration to inform ourselves of the reality of our impervious nature, our infinite existence, or our limitless power. But in the meantime, we are left feeling quite vulnerable. The Moon can be very deceptive. The light it shines is not its own, and the degree to which it shines is never consistent, unless you look closely, unless you learn its cycles, discovering how they match your own. The Moon can be a solitary source of light in the dark, or it can be the source of lunacy. It reflects back our natural state. Sometimes we have to believe the illusions we see are real. Sometimes the aspects of ourselves we consider most real are illusions. In any case, embracing this card will entail embracing the shadow, looking at oneself honestly. When the conditions we find ourselves do not allow us to get and maintain our bearings, we must look within. We must inform ourselves. We must confront the reality of ourselves to see what we're all about, where we're going, what we truly intend, desire, what we truly know, and what we don't know. If we proceed unconsciously, this can mean hysteria. This can mean rejection of reality. This can mean fear. But if we proceed with the light of our own personal truth at the forefront of our being, this can entail the deepest self-realization one can imagine. So there it is. If you take a moment to imagine the unfolding of these events and consider whether or not this is an ideal option for you, and compare it to the other dimensional timeline, this should provide you with everything that you need to make a conscious decision. Upon reflection, you should have a clear sight of the spectrum of potentiality you're working with right now, and then proceed to make your choice. And then stick to that choice, because there could be a temptation involved. If one of these timelines has more gravity to it, for example, it has more probabilities associated with it. If there's a habit involved with the unfolding of one particular event, or addiction, for example, then you might be tempted to consistently step over to that dimension from the one that you might prefer. So be mindful of any temptations you might face, and just manage the potentials as consciously as you can as you proceed. And in order to do that, it's good to have a clear sight of the past section, what you're working with, what has built up to this moment, what your instincts are, what tendencies you may have in response to habitual patterns or familiarity itself. Sometimes the way we always have done things, whether it's easy or not, is the most comfortable. It's the most familiar. Whether or not this is actually good for us, whether or not the paradigm that creates is truly beneficial. Sometimes we stick to things that are simply not serving us, patterns that we may have long since outgrown. So the way that we're going to deal with this past section is by considering the activated potential of each card. We'll talk about the definition of each and what it means, or what the implications of this card are, based on the idea that you would activate them. And in doing so, in activating the card, you would be gaining the perspective that you require to move forward, gaining the wisdom, gaining the insights from the experiences that you've had, so as to more consciously make the decision about how you're going to proceed forward. The card in your most distant past may in fact be something deeply rooted in your childhood experiences, something that is perhaps at the core of your being, something contributing to, much of what you decide to do in life from a subconscious point. And the subconscious is, of course, massive, much more massive than we realize, dealing directly with a huge amount of the information that we interface with on a day-to-day basis. So the subconscious is hugely involved with the decisions that you're going to make moving forward. So in order to gain insight about the workings of the subconscious, it's good to look into the most distant past. And by observing the potentials of this card activated, as they would unfold activated, you can gain the insight about how exactly you're going to do that. You're going to gain insight about the truth of its influence on this part of your subconscious. The card immediately following that would be the direct result of the workings of your subconscious, and then the card following that is, of course, what leads to your central theme. Embracing and therefore activating each of these cards is a process akin to integration, or closure, if you will, revisiting and perhaps resolving events or experiences seemingly embedded in your past that are still active, still actively contributing to your current state and the choices that you're making regarding your future. So here they are, the 3 cards in your past section, in order, starting with your most distant past. The 6 of Cups. Like all 6s in tarot, this is associated with Tiferet on the Tree of Life, Sphirith number 6. This is known as the Sphirith of Beauty, the Light, the Spirit, integration and mission. Some say this has ties to the light of Christ or Buddha, the ultimate enlightened spirit within each of us. And as manifest through water, through cups in this case, this is the experience of pleasure, of harmony, of creativity, sensuality and sexuality, a kind of guiding orgasmic bliss that lets you know you're in the right place at the right time, heading in the right direction. So this card reminds you to follow your highest excitement, follow your bliss, as it's often said. Doing so takes a great deal of faith. To commit only to that which brings you pleasure is a huge risk. But it is precisely this action, this risk, this willingness to risk it all for the pursuit of pleasure may to some seem foolish, but it may in fact, if genuine, be that which aligns you with the law of attraction, the kind of miracle-mindedness that ensures your direct experience of this level of pleasure, and ultimately the truth that you are in fact on the right path. Therefore this card asks you, is this possible? If it is, you'll know it. If not, you'll probably find yourself weighing the pros and cons. The universe is the last major arcana card, and combines the essence of expansive spiritual Neptune and the transmutative death and rebirth process embodied by Pluto. On the Tree of Life, this is the straight shot between Yesod and Malkuth, the last 2 Sphiriths, 9 and 10. Number 9, Yesod, is the engine room of creation, where everything is built, and 10 is the plane upon which all of that potential manifests. So even though the universe is number 22, the final card of the major arcana deck, its affiliation with the whole death and rebirth process alludes to the cyclical nature of reality, and suggests that death is perhaps the fundamental creative force behind life itself. When this card surfaces, something has found its natural conclusion. It can also indicate that harmony has been or is being achieved between spirit and body. The prerequisite here is, of course, the willingness to allow something to come to its natural end. Don't be the artist that paints for years and years on end, long after the painting could have been finished. If this might be the case in one way or another, allowing that natural close to occur can bring about the harmony between spirit and body. Through such a state, success is inevitable. The 2 of Discs is one of the 4 cards in tarot associated with Chokmah on the Tree of Life, imagination, intuitive insight, the right hemisphere of the brain. This being Sphirith 2, of course, follows Sphirith 1, which is Keter. This is where the primordial essence of each respective element resides. So this is, in fact, the first step towards full actualization in the 10, in the kingdom. So in this case, the element of Earth's first step towards full actualization manifests as initiated change, beginning with the imagination of what might be possible, what could be different, realistically looking at the situation at hand and imagining an alternative, then making a suggestion, if not only within your own mind, as to how this change could come about. It embodies the decision that occurs just before action is taken. Embracing this card entails the complete acceptance of the truth, of the facts, and the willingness to take an active role in life's development. It's important to note that while this card does imply action is being taken, it warns against indecision. If action is to be taken, and it certainly is implied here that it is, it must be decisive action if the result is going to be as you intend it to be. Alright, so your experiences of these 3 cards has contributed directly to your current state, this snapshot of the current situation outlined by your central theme and the 2 choices that you have, or the 1 choice rather, that you have to make regarding these 2 options. So now let's consider your fate section, the most certain probabilities you could possibly have. And I should add, it's important to not take these too literally. Take some time to really reflect on the potentials and creatively think about how the nature of these cards might unfold in your life, how they might be directly related to you. Everyone's unique, we all have our own unique circumstances. So the nature of the potentials within these cards can manifest any number of ways. And since nobody understands your situation like you do, it'll be up to you to really creatively imagine the ways in which these cards might apply. So we'll go over the definitions of each, and the idea is of course to activate them, to embrace them, because to resist them is merely to delay them, or like I said earlier, to hand the controls over to the dead mechanism of the universe, to the random, to the impersonal, that really has no consideration for your comfort, for your ability to take advantage of the opportunities or avoid unnecessary complications and so on. The forces of nature simply do as they do. So, okay, we'll start with the first, the immediate response to the choice that you are going to make, and then proceed from that point on, the events immediately following the first wave, and then the final culmination. It's important to line up these 3 cards with the 3 cards outlining the dimensional timeline that you're going to choose, because your choices obviously are going to affect the way that each one of these waves is going to unfold, so that gives you an idea of how exactly you can influence your fate, how you can tweak and modify the events that are certain to happen in order to make them more beneficial, in order to make them easier, to make them more profitable, and to also avoid any complications that are unnecessary or any old patterns that you have long since outgrown. So here they are, the 3 cards in your fate section, unfolding in 3 waves, in order. The Queen of Cups. Like all of these court cards, the Queen of Cups is aligned with one of the 16 Myers-Briggs personality profiles. In this case, this is the INFJ, or the Introverted Intuitive Feeling Judger, someone who's an inspiration to other people, someone deeply reflective and introspective, someone who's quietly caring, very creative, linguistically gifted perhaps, and psychic, very contemplative person that has a natural ability to tap into the truth behind illusions. So this personality profile may in fact be what is surfacing, this may in fact be your natural wiring. If this is not the case, embracing this card would entail adopting this personality profile as a kind of strategy, deciding to step back into a more introverted state, deciding to be intuitive rather than basing your decisions on sensory data and evidence, deciding to feel, to not think too much, to not overanalyze, don't get stuck in the process of weighing pros and cons or anything like that, but also to take yourself seriously. Do this with the intention of making something of yourself, being of service to someone or something, of service if not only to yourself, to your goals, to your vision, something that's greater than you or I. Embracing this personality as a method, as a strategy, might bring with it psychic gifts, creative abilities, beyond what you had thought possible before. So this shift in perspective, or this shift in attitude or approach, may bring with it some surprising new ingredients. If this personality profile already seems to be a match, this is simply a matter of being yourself, which, truth be told, is not always easy. The Queen of Discs. Like all queens, like all court cards, the Queen of Discs is associated with one of the Myers-Briggs personality profiles, of which there is 16. 16 profiles, 16 court cards. So convenient. And in this case, the Queen of Discs is associated with the ISFJ, the Introverted Sensing Feeling Judger. This is a very loyal person, someone with a high sense of duty, someone who works behind the scenes, who's ready to sacrifice themselves to do whatever is necessary. Very responsible, very accountable, and they prefer doing. They prefer being part of the solution in any way they can. Whether or not there's an actual problem, they're very progressive. They move constantly upwards and outwards, expanding themselves, expanding everyone with whom they come into contact. They see it as their duty, their responsibility, their mission, sometimes to the detriment of themselves, but not always. This is a personality profile that does understand the importance of filling up their own glass before sharing. So that's just due to the responsibility factor. They know how to maintain their resources in order to ensure that they will be, continuously able to give, to serve, building themselves up to whatever power is necessary, to whatever status is necessary. Sometimes to be most effective in the world, we have to gain some kind of authority. We have to have gone through a certain kind of experience in order for others to trust us as professionals. This profile gets that, understands that truth. So the presence of this card, if not as simple as this is you, this is your natural wiring, implies that this profile is being beckoned forward, is being called for. Perhaps this profile outlines an ideal strategy, or points to an ideal perspective you could have in order to make the best of the situation. Maybe a little more responsibility is called for, maybe a little more loyalty, maybe sacrifices must be made, maybe it's time for you to hold yourself accountable. Deep and honest personal reflection will provide all of the details you need. The Three of Wands. Like all threes in tarot, this is associated with Pineal on the Tree of Life, Sphinx number 3 on the Tree of Life, which has to do with the left hemisphere of the brain. So rationality, logic, deductive reasoning, and this is what allows that which is imagined in the right hemisphere of the brain to be actualized, to be materialized, to be implemented, made real. So as manifest in this case through fire, through wands, this is confidence, this is skill, the development of some kind of new talent or new ability. And since this is happening through the element of fire, rather than earth for example, this happens rather automatically. It's not forced, it's not planned for, it's not mapped out, this is not according to a strategy. This is just simply inspired action, raw, primal, straight from the source, like a volcanic eruption or the Big Bang. In order for this to occur, embracing this card will entail being thrown out of your comfort zone, in all likelihood. To bring about such inspired action so miraculously or suddenly, there has to be a need, there has to be incentive, like bringing about an instinctive response of sorts. Just doing what's necessary. So for example, if there's a dream that you've been having, that you would love to see come into fruition someday, well, this says just do it. Just get it done. Worry about how you're doing it, or rather, watch how you're doing it while you're doing it. Learn from your own action. Take note of this. You can gain a new level of self-trust through the experience of this card. And if this new self-trust means lasting confidence, you will have everything you need. So this final card is the aim of the entire spread. Whether it seems to be something you might need to brace yourself for, or something to be excited about and look forward to, it's something that needs to happen. There's something in it for you. And of course, you can change your experience of this card based on the choices that you make. Starting now, starting here in your central theme, based on these two simplified polarities, choices that you have standing before you like two doors. And fortunately, these doors have signs. They explain what happens on either side. And that's what this tarot reading is all about. That's what tarot reading in general is all about. Giving you the ability to make conscious decisions, putting the steering wheel in your hands, allowing you to make the most of what is going to happen, to benefit the most, to take advantage of opportunities, to avoid unnecessary challenges, to give you insight and the ability to reflect on what has happened, what is happening, and what will happen. I like to think of it as a natural byproduct of the universe coming to know itself. And speaking of the universe and the cosmos, further insight can be attained through astrological factors, considering the transits and natal placements that may be influencing everything that's going on here, everything that has happened, and everything that will happen. So of course, I would strongly recommend considering astrological factors, and whether that entails getting an astrological reading, or some kind of birth chart analysis, transit analysis, anything that can give you the kind of specifics you might want regarding the timing of certain events, regarding certain personal tendencies as dictated by natal placements, regarding the grander story arc defined by, a life mission outlined by certain natal placements such as the North Node, Midheaven, Rising Sign, etc. And of course I would need to be sure to make this available to everyone, and it is, at iamhelios.com. So with that, I thank you so much for listening, and I wish you the very best.